Welcome to Heart of Pieg. My name is Amar Reyes. I'll be the host for today. This segment is called Paternally Yours. This is a short talk discussing how being a father changes our lifestyle. Can you tell us about a little bit about yourself, Kuya Adriel?
Sure. So my name is Eydral de la Cruz. Most of the Filipino community, I go by Doy. So as far as for me, I am a process superintendent in operations at the Imperial Strathcona Refinery. I have two kids, both boys, and one Nash. He is 6 years old, five turning six, and this guy here is Tristan. He is 2 years old.
Hi, my name is Francis. Folks call me PJ. Mechanical technologist at an engineering firm. Currently have two kids, 13 and a 15-month-old. Eldest is Chelsea, and the youngest is France. So it's a big gap there for us.
Kuya Doy, when you first learned that you're having your first child, what went to your mind?
The way I learned that my wife April was pregnant, my first reaction, the way I would describe it is contained joy. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but let me tell you why. So when I got the phone call, I was actually at work with April, my wife. She can be quite impatient, so she wanted to tell me the news as soon as she learned of it. So she took a pregnancy test, and I was actually in a night shift at the refinery. So she called me. She couldn't get a hold of me at first because I wasn't answering on my cell phone. So she actually called down at one of the control rooms at work, and I got the initial news over the radio at the site saying to call your wife. It's very important. So I called her, and she told me that we were expecting our first. And with me being at work, I couldn't express my extreme joy just because, professional setting, I'm trying to be the boss at the time. So it was hard to contain my joy, but it was that was what I would describe it. And similar experience with this one. I got 30 missed messages, 30 phone messages, just because I stepped out for coffee. And then when I came back, it was like, call me, call me, call me, call me, call me. So I called her, and she told me that we were expecting a second one. And same thing, I couldn't really express myself because I was in the middle of work with people around me, and couldn't be high-fiving and passing cigars or anything like that as much as I wanted to. So that was my reaction, I would say, to learning the news that we were expecting.
For us, it's a little bit different. For the first one, it was a little bit of a surprise, and we weren't really expecting it as much as fast as when we got married. We were actually looking forward to having kids later on after we got married, but Chelsea kind of came in a year sooner. So it was a little bit overwhelming for the both of us. We were able to just kind of talk about it, and just things kind of settled down. Then we managed to just welcome the good news. For the second one, just because there was that big gap, and we were actually working hard to have a second one. When we found out that we were having France late last year, it was quite a joyful moment, because of the wait and the gap between the two kids. So that's how it goes, and thankfully we have two beautiful children.
For the follow-up question with regards to your second born, when discussing it with your wives, how do you go about it? Like, do you ask them, When do we want a second child?
Dissimilar from PJ. So we actually waited quite a bit before we had Nash, our firstborn. So I think we were married for 5 years. He was actually born on our anniversary, on our 5-year anniversary. So we waited quite a bit. So we got to enjoy our married life, traveled and everything else like that. And then, the time between Nash and Tristan, we were enjoying having the one kid and, really not thinking about a second one yet. And then you really just, between conversations and asking each other, hey, do we want a second one? Or are we ready for a second one? And ultimately we decided on that because Nash is such an amazing kid. And with April being an only child, or we wanted Nash to experience a sibling. So we started not preventing, I guess would be the the term. I would say a couple months, and we were blessed with another blessing.
So with us, it was just because life happened and it took a while for us to conceive the second one. Like I said, there was that big gap, and then 2019 happened and the pandemic kind of happened. And I guess we could say that this is one of those blessings that the pandemic gave us, because when we got sent home from the office, that's when we kind of got relaxed a little bit, and we conceived the second one. So
Just a comment, Almar. So also, like, what was really important to us is really just communicating between April and myself, just to make sure that we are ready. Because the first, I guess, delivery for her was a little bit traumatic. Nash was an emergency C-section. So for me, I really wanted to make sure that, one, she was willing to go through another experience like that potentially again, because it is really hard for us guys. It's pretty easy. Our job's pretty easy to get it done, but it's really for our wives, our partners, that need to be ready and committed, because the most of the work, in my opinion, is on them, and I wanted to respect that.
In your opinion, what is the biggest change when you had your first child?
0 to 1, it was I think the biggest change was time and energy, and really thinking about somebody else, and taking on that role of not just thinking about yourself or your partner who can take care of themselves, but this other person that relies heavily or everything on you. That was the biggest change for me. And my thought was, what did I do before I had kids? Because it was a lot of time, right? Like sleep was always a thing. I'm good with 4 hours of sleep nowadays, and that was a big thing. And like, these kids kind of take over your lives, which is a change, because you're really thinking about what's best for them and how you can best provide for them. Because for me, it's not the things that you could give them, but it's the time and the commitment that is the biggest investment. Because you could be easily forgotten, and all these times that, especially when they're young, that is like the most precious time to build those foundations, to spend time with them. And the transition from 1 to 2, I would say, if you think about basketball, I'm a big basketball guy. So if you have one kid, it's 2-on-1, easy, right? Like, fast break, easy layup, no problems, right? Now, when you put another person in there, it's 2-on-2. So at first, you're able to both focus on the one kid, and it's easy. And as difficult as that one kid might be, fortunately for us, Nash was really good, but you can focus all your attention on this one kid. When there's two, you want to be able to focus the same amount on the new one with Tristan here, but also not neglect your older one. So your time just gets split that much more. So it's always that balance of, am I giving enough time for both of them to be able to grow them into the kind human beings that you want them to be, and having that enough time to do that between the two of them and equally.
I guess just piggybacking on what Doi said, the transition between from zero to one, it's quite nerve-wracking at times, just because you don't know what to expect. Every kid is different, and one thing that I kind of learned as we got along is, as your kid is developing, you're still requiring them to give them some time. With the transition between the two kids, mind you, there's a gap between, for our situation, there's a big gap between the two. And that was also a little bit of a benefit for us, because it allowed us to concentrate with the elder child as she was developing, and as she grew into a much more responsible, self-reliant child, we have now the time to kind of give that same focus with the younger one. So that's the benefit for it. And then I guess one more tip is, when you find out that you're pregnant, or your wife is pregnant, you should bank on more sleep as you possibly can, because as you are working with your wife to take care of the child, for the first 2 years of their young lives, parents will struggle with the lack of sleep. So pack as much sleep as you can.
Good to know.
Yeah.
How do you juggle your time? Who's gonna wake up at around 2 a.m.? Do you pre-plan those?
Oh yes, yeah. That's a communication between the parents, because oftentimes, yes, that the mom will be the stay at home for the first year of the child's life, but sometimes you kind of need to give them some break to get a stretch of 4 hours sleep or 6 hours sleep. If at least, if you can give them 8 hours, they're gonna love you forever.
I would say I'm very fortunate. I have this superpower that I can go back to sleep fairly quickly. April doesn't have that. It's like, if she wakes up, it's gonna take her like 2 or 3 hours to fall back asleep. So we talked, and we decided that I'll do the morning wake ups up to a certain point, because obviously I have to go to work the following day. So up to like 4 o'clock or 3:30, I would do the wake ups no matter how many times, and do the feeding. Obviously, it's a little bit different in the very beginning, because the baby is very dependent on mom with breastfeeding and everything else like that, right? So that changes things. The way we handle that is I would get up and bring the baby over to her, so she doesn't have to get up. I would still wake up to pass the baby, but she would still be doing all the work, unfortunately, until Tristan and Ash were old enough to take the bottle.
One thing that Doi had mentioned was, he developed that skill to sleep early, and that's actually something I learned from him, because I can tell you that this one story where our families were hanging out at our place, and the girls took the kids out for somewhere, and Doi and I stayed because we told the girls that we're going to take a nap. The minute they got out of the door, we were napping. So it's a learned skill. Like taking a nap right away could be a learned skill.
All right. My next question would be discipline. How do you discipline your children?
That's a tough one, because there's always a balance of you want to. For me, anyway, I'm a people pleaser, and that includes my kids and my friends and family. So that's very tough for me. So I had to really learn this and align this with April. We learned it from other people, but really just kind of going down to their level. If you have to go kneel down and look at them eye to eye and really just explain to them what they did wrong or why it's wrong, and try to explain them the why. They might not always understand it at first, but you're building those foundations to have that conversation and not raising your voice, because they will pick up what you do. They're like sponges. They will just copy everything that you do. So if you want them to yell, you will yell. But if you want them to calm down and actually talk down to a calm voice and understand what they're doing, talk to them like people. The earlier you do that, the sooner they'll pick up on that and take it as a main foundation for the way they are as people.
Well, for me, I grew up in a very, I don't know, strict household before. You still need to kind of create that balance, just because, things change and you're in a different setting. Sometimes those old traditions or old ways of disciplining kids sometimes is not relevant anymore in the newer age. But you still need to find that balance to how you're comfortable with the way you're disciplining them. For me, sometimes when it's a safety issue, it's a non-negotiable that sometimes I yell. Like when kids run off to somewhere that's unsafe, I'll raise my voice a little bit. But when things settle down, you kind of explain to them why that's not something that needed to be done, because number one, we as a parent want them to be safe. But for the most part, it's always a balancing act between the mom and the dad, because you don't want to end up looking like both of you are confusing the child. So you have to have a certain rules and guidelines that, if this is something that needs to be done as a family, try to explain that this is the way how the family dynamics will work.
Yeah, well, how hard are you with your kids, with your children? So basically, Kuya PJ, you said if it's a no, like a big infraction, you yell, right? What's their initial reaction to your yelling?
Oftentimes they would cry because they are going to be scared at dad. But I'm thankful that, we always have that chance after, where I have the opportunity to explain why it had happened and why things are needed to be corrected.
Just to build on that, from what PJ said, all kids are different and all of them will react differently. For example, for us, like our oldest Nash, he, when you go down to his level and you talk to him, he's very quick at understanding what's going on. He will get upset and he will cry. He doesn't like not being good, quote unquote. So he will get upset. Tristan, he takes a little bit more work. So there is some times where you do need to be, I wouldn't say yelling, but your voice becomes more stern just because he reacts that way. But to build on what PJ was saying, it's understanding your kids, understanding on how you want to go about discipline, and making sure that you're just aligned with your partner on that. And because the last thing you want to do is, like what PJ says, confuse the kids, and one person being too lenient and the other one person being the hard one, and it just the kids will then just gravitate to one or the other, right? So that's one thing that you definitely don't want to do. You create these people, and it's your responsibility, yours and your wife's responsibilities, to grow them as good human beings. And part of being a good human being is holding them accountable, because if they do something wrong, they should know about it and they should learn from it. And how you go about that can be different. The biggest thing is, to get through them, to understand the why it's wrong versus that, no, it's just wrong, right? And not, going back and explain to them exactly what they did wrong, right?
Your children are still relatively the young age. How do you plan their future?
We have aspirations for the kids, but nothing to no, I want him to be like the next NBA players, the next Steve Nash, right? As much as that would be really cool to us, we just kind of encourage them on their interest. We try to get them exposed to different things, like music, sports, and just really trying to give them a really good foundation so then they can make that choice down the future. Like for example, Nash, when he was, I'd say 3 or 4, we put him into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, see if he was interested in that. And he wasn't into the physicality of it. So we asked him, hey, do you want to continue to do this next year? And, he said, no. It's like, okay, so we'll do something else. So we put him into music. He really enjoyed that. Now he's in piano. So it's really just trying different things, but really trying to read your kids' interest. And, if they really grasp onto something that they really love, encourage that, and then let them make the decision of to keep going. But yeah, they are still quite young. So, as much as I want to plan the future for them, my real plan for them is just to grow them and to be good people in society. So that's my main goal, and that's April's main goal as well, is just to grow good humans.
I can answer to that, Almar, just because I'm a bit more closer to that mentality. Going through that, I felt immense pressure being that way. So I made a choice that have that, like Doi was saying, that, give that child a bit more flexibility on what interests them. And as a little bit of a caveat, kids will change their minds to what they like multiple times during their life. So when they find that interest, just give them that support, because you never know what they will become in the future, right? Just give them those foundation, give them the support, hope that things will work out at the end. You can plan as much as you can, but really the choice will be with the child when they're much older. So long as you have give them the foundations to be successful, that will go a long way for them to find what they want to do in life.
The only thing I would add is just like I said, understanding your kids, even though they say you present something to them and they say, no, I don't really want to do that, but they haven't tried it yet. What I would suggest is, hey, convince them to try it once. If it's not for them, and you see that they're not really interested in it, then you move on, right? But at least they tried it. It's not that, no, I just don't want to try it. No, let's try it once and see how you feel afterwards. If you really don't like it, then I'll support, but not wanting to do it is not an excuse, I would say.
And also try to keep involved play with the choices, because the kids will gain more interest on it if there's some sort of play foundation to it.
Do you have any thoughtful advice to like future fathers?
Take time for yourself. Allow your partner to have time for themselves, because having that mental break, because the kids can consume you, I would say. It's making sure that you have a committed time on your own or just for the two of you, because you need that break, or else the pressure of fatherhood or parenthood will crush you. So you need to take that mental break like everything else, right? In order to be successful. If you're burnt out, you don't want to be that time where you snap at your kid and you say something that you don't mean, because you don't know what kind of impact that will be. So, finding the time to get yourself rested, refreshed, so then you can come back to the next fight, right? To go ahead and continue to parent the way you've always been parenting and stay that consistent basis.
For me, ask questions and ask for help. Parenting is not really brand new for people. We've always been society built on being parents. Some ways could be parallel to what you are kind of going through, and sometimes you learn something new, right? Life is full of growing opportunities. Don't leave yourself in isolation. If you need help, if you need guidance on how to handle things, ask somebody much older than you, or have somebody going through the same experience. Maybe they've learned a couple things, lessons here and there.
Yeah. With that note, Kuya TJ, when you do have like a little bit of a problem with your own children or with parenting, Do you go to your mom and dad and ask for advice, or you want to stay away?
For me, I think I've asked them a couple questions or two, just because you want to be able to have that cultural connection, or like that discussion as to how you can raise the child in accordance to how we want them to be culturally raised, or part of our Filipino culture.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's some instances where asking your parents or your even grandparents can sometimes be a good resource as well. There are nuggets there that so don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's hard, and then they parent you too.
That
So
that that's
sometimes
an interesting question, because oftentimes when you ask that question, they'll be the answer that they'll give you is, you were like that when you were a kid.
how
I
about your
agree with
parents?
what I agree with what PJ said. It's they're a great resource. They've gone through it, and they've been there. What I would say is still approach them and use them as a resource. But what I would suggest is build yourself your own network of people that are aligned with your own values and your own parenting style, because there are obviously different parenting styles. Depends on how you want to raise your kids. They are your kids. Your parents did a really good job, or my parents did a really good job with me anyway. So I would definitely use them as a resource. Their style is a little bit different than mine. So I might not always take their advice, but definitely use them as a resource and look for other similar styles to build yourself a network. So similar to, me and TJ talk on how we parent.
Do your parents like tell you like, don't do this, don't do that? Do they sometimes?
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
My parents are
most of the
very
time.
active, and I think a lot of parents are this way, and they're not comfortable with the kids crying. So anytime they hear the kid crying, they need to go and comfort them right away. So it's like they need to make them stop, even though sometimes um, allowing them to cry and soothe themselves, and going down to their level and talking to them while they're crying might be the best method for them to understand, okay, so what happened. So then you're not, I would say, feeling always coddled, that hey, someone's always going to be here to go and catch you when you hurt yourself or you're feeling bad. But being able to help them learn how to deal with it, but be there as a support. So that's, to me, was the biggest difference between the parenting style that we've chosen versus kind of older generations, because they're uncomfortable with the sound of children crying.
For to just add on to what Doi was saying, there could be a little bit of difference between their parenting style and what you want to do. When I said ask questions, I meant ask multiple people questions, but tailor the information to what works for you. So when you are having conversation with your parents and asking them solution to a problem or a situation that you've gone through, sometimes those answers may not work for that situation that you have, but having that discussion with them kind of gives you a little bit of that bonding moment as well with your parents, just so that that you're letting them know that they're a part of how you are raising the child. You're asking them for suggestions, and you're giving them the opportunity to become somewhat of a part of that child's life as well.
How do you break that friction with your mom and dad?
I would say for Filipino parents, when they know that you are becoming a parent, they're just gonna go and say, "It's your turn now. Do what you can." I had the opportunity to they got good opportunity that my parents were a little bit hands off with how we want to raise our child. So I know some grandparents are a little bit more hands on, but with our parents, your Ate Kenny and I are had the freedom to choose and become responsible for the life that we're molding.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar answer. It's tough because there's such a big difference in parenting style that there could be friction. I don't always do a good job, I would say, of communicating that to my parents anyway. So, but taking the time afterwards and say, hey, this is the style that we're going with, and it's okay for them to cry. So really just trying to explain to them what you're trying to do. Like I said, I'm not always the best at doing this, but it's something that I would like to work on more as because you do kind of take offense, incoming styles, I would say that are conflicting with yours, because you are with your kids 98% of the time, and you're very, I guess, defensive with anybody else making those type of suggestions or suggesting maybe that you're doing it wrong. So I personally kind of hold that in defense, because I think we're doing a good job. So
Yeah. So like just like for a simple example, I know Doi can relate to this, but because our children were born during the pandemic, they weren't as social as the elder children that we had. When sometimes when they would see new faces, it takes them a while to get acclimated to them, and they would be snobbish or cry if they don't know the person. Often when it's a grandparent and they don't really like being brushed off when they see their grandchildren, you still need to take that chance to like explain to them that this is how this child is at the moment. So please be patient and all that stuff. So
yeah, because I mean they're always comparing it to the first one, right? And if like for our example there that PJ mentioned, with our younger ones, takes them a little bit of time to get used to people, which is reasonable, as they didn't see a lot of people during the pandemic year. So even the grandparents, they don't see them as much as they did with the first one, because just the restrictions and everything else. So it's tough when they ultimately just say, oh, this one's different. Why isn't he the same as the other one? You're defensive of that because it's like, well, there's circumstantial stuff that's different. I hate comparing my kids because they're two different people, and they're both great in their own way.
Any last message for the dads out there before we go?
Nothing additional. I'd say, like, yeah, my first message there from before is just take the time, use your breaks, give your wife the breaks, be aligned with the way you want to raise your kids. Because if you are aligned as a cohesive unit, you and your spouse, then your kids will know that, and they know that they can't go to one or the other for leniency or stuff like that. So it's being aligned upfront and talking about it, and say, hey, how would we do this in the future? And as well as in front of the kids, don't undermine your partner. You guys might have different thought process at the time, but then talk about that afterwards, not in front of the kids, because they will sense that there is some friction or some misalignment, and they'll feed off that. They'll escalate it, and they're like, oh, okay, well, I can get away with it because mom and dad aren't aligned with it. So those would be my messages, Elmer.
going back to just giving them time as well. Kids grow up fast, they'll find something else that interests them, but give them that time to do things together as much as you can during their developing years. Kids are like sponges, like what Doi had said, and the best people to learn things is from their parents. However much time you can spend with them while taking care of yourself, it gives them that that important developmental opportunity for them to and create memories as well. You always need to have some balance, because you can't really save a life or raise a child if you're struggling a little bit too, right? If you take care of yourself, that will give you that opportunity, that access time, or that extra energy to give to the next person.
It's great to know, and I want to say thank you for your deep thoughts. this is an advanced Father's Day for you guys, for all the fathers out there, right? So I want to salute you for your sacrifices as a young father, right?
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate that. And happy Father's Day to everybody else out there. You guys are all doing a great job.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share some thoughts, and I do appreciate you guys making this endeavor and sharing it to people. As a community, as a network, we just need to be able to find that resource to, help each other out. Happy Father's Day to everyone, and keep on doing what you can. And I'm sure you're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Father's Day to all.